Welcome, everyone, to my brand new podcast, Heal Your Mind, Heal the World. My name is Anne Marie Morales. I'm a certified transpersonal hypnotherapist and intuitive energy healer. And the theme of this podcast is how each and every one of us heal our minds and how we end up healing the world. And my very first guest for this series is a dear friend of mine, Mr. BooBoo Garcia. He is the host of Broaderlenspodcast, and I welcome you so warmly to Heal the Mind, Heal the World podcast. Welcome, BooBoo.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Oh, yeah, it's an honor for me. You came across my work almost 2 years ago, I think, huh?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you invited me on your podcast a couple years ago, and we just remained in touch over the years. And I couldn't think of a better person to start my new series with. And so I'm so honored to have you here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Tell us a little bit about, well, you have a very beautiful story, hero's journey to have brought you to where you are right now. So, would you be kind enough to share with us your journey, please?
Yeah, I mean, how long do you want me to go? Because I can, I can
Yeah.
ramble and there's a lot of details to it. But I grew up in San Pedro, California, and I always tell people where the Love Boat used to be. And right there's a bridge that divides San Pedro and Long Beach, California. And you know, I've done a lot of reflecting, and I look back at my life, and I got to see how things affected me in different ways that I've never been able to do before my awakening. But both of my parents are gang members, and it's funny. I did a documentary when I was 14 years old, and I just watched it, and yeah, I got to see my father in on TV, and just we grew up in a lot of gangs. My dad was a gang member. My mother was a gang member. That was my upbringing, and I got to see how it affected me. My house was the party place around town. It seemed like, and a lot of gang members would come and party. And I remember certain men would walk into our little apartment, and energy would shift. And I remember thinking, whatever they have, I want. And they had respect, and respect means power, right? Um, and my dad seemed like, and my dad, like, I knew as I look back today, my mother and father loved me the best they could with the tools they had. And if they would have known better, they would have done better. But at the time, I didn't, right? And it seemed like anything I would do, my dad would hit me, the vacuum cord, and, that hurt me, mentally and physically. And I would run to the school playground just to get away because I felt different. I always felt different than the other kids. Why do I have to have this family? I remember thinking far back. I'd run to the school playground and I'd play sports, and I had to be the best at everything because deep down inside I felt less than. So I put up this persona already, right? And because if I'm number one at this sport, you're going to want to be my friend. You're going to want to I'm gonna be respected and loved. That I felt like that was already missing. So yeah, I grew up in that type of environment. My dad was shot 5 times in 2 different occasions. He was stabbed in the face. My mom was sliced over 50 times. I grew up in a lot of violence. I would be playing with little kids, and next in the alley, and next my dad's friends are arguing. They're stabbing each other right in front of us. Or the ambulance is coming to revive my father. He was a heroin addict, did crystal meth, and my mother as well. So
As a hypnotherapist, as somebody, well, you've described so many trauma inducing episodes or experiences that would leave really deep scars in people that they come to people like myself for healing. Um, I'd like to fast forward to a mystical experience that you had. Now, before you describe it, this shared death experience of your father, was this before or after you had an awakening?
this was before I had
Okay. Perfect. That's what I was wondering. So yeah, we get you grew up in this awful, hate the judgment word, but very difficult environment. You picked it up yourself, I assume, and I think I know that you did. But then you grow up and you have this experience. So could you kind of tell us about that?
About when eventually my father came back into my life, right? And he wanted to be a father to me, and I was still pushing him away, but eventually we started spending some time together, and we ended up going to a cliff, to make a long story short, and where my uncle just got out of prison. He's trying to stay out of trouble, and he's flying a remote control airplane. It eventually gets stuck, and it gets stuck on the plane in the cliffs, and you can see it. I'm looking over the cliff, and you could literally see the plane. We debated on getting it, and we decided not to. Well, my dad took a couple more steps down. Next, you know, he slid off the cliff, and I see dust. So I ran about a mile away where there's a staircase that goes all the way down to the rocks. And by the time I catch up to my father, he's gone, compressed against the rocks, and I touch him. But when I touch him, I had this out of body experience, and I seen everything outside of me, and I seen the whole scene. I'd even seen the police officers and the firemen raining down, and people overlooking looking at the from the very top of the cliff at the whole scene, and see my uncle and me. And I just felt like I tapped into my dad's consciousness, um, and I didn't talk about it much. But eventually, after my awakening, and especially starting podcasts, you hear about shared death experiences. I didn't have the lingo. But what's interesting about that is when I was a kid, I always felt like I lived in India, you know, and I felt like I lived in certain places before. I had like a little bit of remembrance. So when I had my awakening, I went back to those teachings, and then in the Bhagavad Gita it talks a lot about how the self doesn't die. So I thought that was pretty interesting, that connection.
And when you were going through this shared death experience, can you describe to us did you experience any emotions while you were in that eagle's eye view?
Yeah, that's a good question, but I didn't feel any emotions. I was just the observer. It was just pure consciousness, a pure state of consciousness, where I was just the observer. I didn't experience that until I went back into, it's like changing scenes from a movie, and I went back into my body. And that was hard. I had a lot more anger escalated, and 2 weeks later, my brother-in-law was shot in the head. So my drinking really escalated after that because I didn't know how to process this stuff.
Sure. Wow, that's amazing. So here you are. You've experienced this extraordinary tragedy, 2 extraordinary tragedies. You're in the gang life, I'm assuming, right? You're still in the gang life. You are alcoholic. What happened to prompt your awakening?
I often use a quote by Carl Jung and Eckhart Tolle, and he talks. Carl Jung says there's no coming to consciousness without pain, and Eckhart Tolle says at the beginning of all addiction there was pain, and at the end of all addiction there was pain. And I was in so much pain, I finally woke up. I had like the dark night of the soul they talk about, and I call my awakening a glimpse to nirvana. I was in so much pain. And this is interesting, I never really talk about, but my friend Carlo, who passed away a couple years back, he OD'd. He was in and out of prison since we were kids, and he finally got out, and I guess his dad kicked him out. He had nowhere to go, and he ended up ODing, but on fentanyl. But he called me like 2 years later after my awakening. He was in prison, and we talked, and he was with me that day. And you know, I blacked out, got a bunch of stuff. There was a big shooting, everything you name it happened, but that night I went back to my buddy's house, who found out I was homeless and let me stay in his apartment. My friend Carlo was with me that night, but I blacked out, and he said I was in the bedroom, and he was hearing these weird noises as if I'm fighting my own demons. He heard like exorcist type sounds and stuff. He was so afraid he didn't bother me. He left, and I believe I was fighting my own demons at that time, you know, my own attachments or whatever. But during that time, I had what I call a nirvana, glimpse of nirvana type awakening, where everything just went black. Everything was like you hear about the ego death, and I had like a brief moment of in that sense of I was gone.
Right.
And I was just in, I wouldn't say I'm at peace. I was just in a state of nothingness. And
Would you
but
call
as fast,
that the void? Were you in that void space?
yeah, you're right, the
Yeah.
void.
Yeah.
But I can't say it was peace. I can't say what it was. I don't know. But I was just, but as fast as that turned off, the egoic eye, it turned back on like those magic candles. And then I was in fear. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I knew I needed help because I was drowning in that sea of alcoholism, in that unresolved trauma, and all these false identities. But something happened after that. And there was a shift in consciousness where I was no longer the person that I once was. Sometimes you hear about walk-ins. I'm not calling it a walk-in, but I just felt like I'm just a totally different person now. My whole worldview changed. Everything changed. I had this inner knowing that I was no longer the old self died, like kind of the St. Francis prayer. It is only by dying that one awakens to eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, I've heard that with a few people. And recently I've just been saying, gosh, I want a near death experience, but I don't want to die. Okay. It's like, I don't feel like dying, but I think I'd like to have that kind of near death experience. And it sounds that that's kind of what you had. Like you had that ability to pull out, or you had the experience of pulling out into the void, releasing the ego, which is really all that makes us who we are here on this earth plane and gives us our personality and whatever ties us to the identity of BooBoo or Anne Marie. You went into that unified field, and then you dropped back down, so that is what happened, and you shifted. You just woke up and you said, I ain't going to do this anymore. Or what happened? What happened right after that?
It was just, I just had a complete shift in consciousness. I was no longer, and it's funny when you hear like sometimes in the near death experiencers community or INs, you hear about near death like. I'm like, near death like? A spiritual awakening is a death. And the old self died. It was gone. There was a death there. And there was a number of deaths, those false identities that were unhealthy because I still need identity. We're still having a human experience. But the unhealthy aspects, a lot of the major ones were gone. Of course, I still had to do some work, and I went through the 12 steps and stuff. But yeah.
Oh wow! In my head, I'm thinking I must be going through death of 1,000 cuts because you got this experience and shifted out of it. Describe your next day after you had this experience. What was that like for you?
My friend asked if I would want to go to a 12-step meeting, and I was scared to go to a 12-step meeting, but I went. But what it was like for me, it was like having a new pair of glasses. Like I was looking through. I had a different worldview, and I didn't even know what that was yet. But I just know I was really I had a humble heart, if that makes sense. Like where I just became like an open to like new ideas and new levels of consciousness that I've never experienced before. I was like that beginner's mind the Buddhists talk about. That was open. In AA they talk about that willingness, honesty, and open mindedness, and I had those three essentials that helped me on the spiritual path.
Wow, that is so amazing, incredible. And now you call yourself a mystic, and you've been visited by masters. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience in your life?
I call myself a mystic because it's just fun, but I just love mysticism. I grew up in I didn't grow up with religion or spirituality. Like I said, I came from the streets, so I always say mystic from the hood. But the reason why I say that is because a lot of mysticism came to me from when I had my dreams. I just had I felt this presence early on. About a year into my awakening, I went to a local church, and I don't know the difference. I'm just trying to really, I'm a seeker, right? Um, And I sit in a service, and all of a sudden I hear a voice saying, "He doesn't know what he's preaching." I'm like, "What? He knows not what he preaches." I'm like, "Oh, who was that?" Like I remember thinking, like, "What was that?" And then I went to the gift store and asked for a Gandhi book or a Neil Donald Walsh book, and it was on the no buy list, and it really got me to question stuff. But I started to feel this presence, and I come to find out it was Paramahansa Yogananda. And yeah, and it's weird. It goes back to that connection in India. When I was a kid, I always felt like this connection with India. And I'm a Mexican kid from Los Angeles, like, well, not brought up and I didn't know who he was or anything. And then I remember I heard a speaker in AA talk about Unity Church. So I went to a Unity Church. That sounds familiar. And it was an ex-priest. And it talked about Unity Church. So I went my first day at Unity Church in Torrance, California. I'm in Unity Church, and there was a guest minister, and he starts talking about Paramahansa Yogananda. When my friend found out I was homeless and let me stay with him, he had a book. He had two books, and I didn't pay no attention. This didn't click until a couple years later. But he had a Yogananda book there, and he had a Neil Donald Walsh book there, Conversations with God.
Wow.
And I just felt like it was always trying to speak to me, Yogananda. I go to the SRF finally, and I sit in the SRF in Pacific Palisades.
Can you tell us what SRF is?
Self-realization fellowship that Yogananda started, and one of the main ones, his main locations is Pacific Palisades, right by Malibu, and there's a lake there. It's called Lake Shrine, and it's a beautiful lake. I would spend a lot of time there at the lake, and there's like if you look on the rocks, there's like a Buddha statue, and there's just like a stream of rocks going going towards the little lake, and then you see Krishna with the water flowing into the lake, and then you see Yeshua with the water flowing under him into the lake, and it's like these different paths to one truth. They're all guiding souls to the lake, and that lake represents God or the highest self, which we all are, right? And I loved how it was like anonymously with the Buddha, because the Buddha doesn't really talk about God, but he's anonymously taking you back to that part of the lake.
Wow. And how often did he visit you? Like, was it a regular thing? Is he still, do you feel his presence still? Like, what's going on with that?
No, I don't feel his presence anymore like I used to. But I would say the first handful of years, I felt guided by Yogananda. One day I was sitting at the lake, and he says, "Don't worship my own self-realization, focus on your own." That was the whole purpose of my teachings. And he showed me how a lot of people got caught up worshiping his words. And then you see the two fellowships arguing amongst each other. There's the self-realization fellowship and Ananda fellowship, and they go into court with each other and stuff like that. But I remember sitting in a service, and you see the lineup of gurus. Yeshua was there, his gurus, and what was interesting is one day I'm sitting there in the service, and I just felt his whole image, the whole picture, compared to the rest of the gurus. It was vivid. It was like alive for me, and I could feel him like it's me. Okay. I had like this inner knowing, like he's talking to me through feeling. That makes sense. Yeah.
Wow. How beautiful. So you've been doing Broader Lens podcast for how long now?
Oh, maybe like 2.5 years, 3 years, going on 3 years.
Okay. Yeah. And what made you want to start this platform?
Well, about maybe several years ago, I had this intuition that I need to do this, but the fear held me back. Like I had a lot of fear, so I didn't do it, and I believe that was in the collective. Someone just grabbed that, and I didn't move on that. But a few years later, I ended up starting a podcast. I felt really inspired to really, you know, help out my community where I grew up, and I got to see how being a young kid identifying with the spacesuit, how that affected me. You watch Hollywood. The only time you see a Mexican guy, he's usually handcuffed or a rapist or stuff like. And when I realized that, how not to be a victim or whatever, but really just try to understand how things affected me. I go, you know what? I'm gonna make some changes. I'm gonna talk about spirituality and be open minded and really just be myself, and hopefully give that young little kid the little boy or whoever just the courage to like give them a new perspective on things. Like gang members. I joined a gang not to be a bad guy. I joined a gang because I wanted to feel loved
Feel
and a
love.
part of and feel like a somebody. So really, just trying to help understand the human condition and beyond a little bit more better.
That is so beautiful. And have you gotten a response from like your old homies, the guys that you used to grow up with, or have you gotten feedback from gang members or people that look at you and go, "Oh, they have the same color as I do," How's that been for you?
No, I haven't really got too many responses. I've had a few. I know a few of my old friends say I'm crazy, or do you hear what he's talking about? That's devil stuff, because they become Christian, and so I hear that kind of judgment. But every now and then I get someone to tell me thank you for what you're doing. That don't come from the streets though. But my key is just to help. Just help in any which way I can, and just giving new perspectives, and the courage to be themselves.
I've gotten that too. I went to Catholic school all the way through 12th grade, and we were a very small, very motivated group of Catholic kids. And I got pushback from one particular individual who became a very what kind of Christian? Very fundamentalist, I would say, kind of Christian, that the Bible is everything. But actually, they were quite open to what I'm doing, and I'm not really hiding what I do. Especially, we keep in touch over Facebook. That's kind of how we keep in touch. But I've gotten kind of the same thing. And people from the Catholic Church cutting me off, telling me I'm demonic and all that great stuff. And other people telling me that I'm doing the devil's work. I'm like, okay, all right. If that's what you think, God bless you, and I love you. So last question on the podcast. Who was the guest that you got the most starstruck? Because you have interviewed some very spiritual heavy hitters. And which or two, let's say top 3 guests besides me, of course.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Besides you, I would say Marianne Williamson. I think I surprised her because I didn't get her just for her being popular. I got her because she's touched my heart on the spiritual path with her work, her books. And so to have her on my podcast and really we identified with a lot of the mystics that she talks about, and knowing about her work surprised her. She even got to a point where in the interview was like, "Who are you?"
Yeah. I saw that interview and I thought she was completely smitten. I'm like, oh, Marianne Williamson's gonna be like, BooBoo, let's go out together. Let's have a drink. Let's go out. Let's party. No. Okay, so that's number 1. Who else? Give me top 3.
I would say Neil Donald Walsh, and the reason why is because like you see him on a lot of podcasts, but no one really talked about how he felt when he was homeless, because that gift of desperation and that struggle I experienced. So knowing his story and actually talking about it and bringing that back up, I think that really caught his attention as well, and just really identifying with him and his work, because like I said, they had an impact in my journey. No, I knew his work, not just I didn't get him because he was popular either. He actually had a lot of influence in my own path.
And he was quite impressed with you too. I mean, I read people, I can tap into people's energy and into their hearts, and he was so impressed with you. I can, I felt that through the interview. Anybody else?
I have 2 more, and it's I would say Matthew Fox, who wrote a lot about Christian mysticism. I found his work early on in my journey, and really being able to relate with Matthew Fox, and he understands the saying by Meiser Eckhart, paraphrasing Meiser Eckhart, who Eckhart totally changed his name to once he had his awakening. But he talks about theologians may argue, but mystics will understand. And I'm paraphrasing that because mystics do understand each other. That veil between religions and all that is gone. And he knows a lot about the mystics. I believe he's a mystic himself. And we just had a really good conversation. And he opened up and shared some personal experiences with Thich Nhat Hanh, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah. And Elaine Pagels, she's the person who helped translate the Gospel of Thomas.
Yes.
And I felt like I might have been a Gnostic, what they call Gnostics now, because they didn't call themselves Gnostics then. But I might have had a life as a Gnostic at one time, because that really spoke to me in my path early on. Like I said, when I was at Unity Church, going to Unity Church, checking that out, I knew a lot about the Gospel of Thomas. Gospel, verse 3, verse 70 or 24. Like, I had that, like, it sunk into my heart. So just talking about that and knowing her work, I think that surprised her too.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
So the theme of this podcast is Heal Your Mind, Heal the World. And this was a download given to me by my guidance. And the image that they gave to me for this theme is that we are all interconnected through the web of life. And the only thing we truly have control over is our own minds. We have no control over really anything else. And by healing our own mind, we raise our frequency up. And just like the pole of a circus tent, that, let's say, the web of life of human consciousness is like the circus tent, and we are one point on that tent, but if we elevate our own energy, our own frequency, our own minds, heal our own minds, by default, we heal the world. And so I'm going to be posing 2 questions to all of my guests. And the first question is, how did you heal your mind? And what did that look like?
That's a great question. I love those questions. Speaking of Yogananda, he said, it's spiritual poverty, not material lack, that is the root of human suffering. And how I began to shift is that awakening, for one, being in so much pain, but I also had a lot of work to do, as you would know. And I went through the 12 steps. And one of the 12 steps are the universal principles that are shared in every religion and every spiritual tradition. But I learned how to live on the spiritual teachings on a daily basis. I think that can be sometimes, in the spiritual communities, we talk a lot about the galactic stuff and all that. But what about to Earth? Like, how are you being loving and kind? And I remember telling Neil Donald Walsh, the problem with love thy neighbor as thyself is a lot of people don't love themselves anymore, including me. And when I walked into the 12-step community, I learned how to love myself. And one of the major things I found in the 12-step principles and going through those steps was, the Buddha says, with our thoughts, we create the world. But I had to first see how the world created my thoughts. And I had to go back through that resentment list and write these resentments down and write these experiences that were hurtful to me and try to understand them with awareness. And then when I started to see how things affected me in all these false beliefs and behaviors, I could see maybe my mother and my father had secrets. Maybe they had traumas. Maybe they had stuff. So like Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I started to look at things from an entirely different angle. And I started looking through the lens of the heart versus the unhealthy aspects of the ego. Because I don't believe the ego is completely bad. It's the part of the human experience. I need it.
Yeah.
But I started to integrate. I started to meet the shadow on the spiritual path for the first time. And that unconscious became conscious and enlightenment began to occur, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I'm glad you mentioned the whole galactic thing. I mean, I'm totally a starseed. I admit, I'm a card carrying starseed, blue avian, Pleiadian, whatever else Adian. I know that that's a part of what I am. But the truth of the matter is that all of us awakened souls, were here to integrate into the human condition. We can't ignore the human condition, and I believe that's exactly what you're talking about. we can get guidance from ascended masters, from higher consciousness. I mean, I'm a channeler of higher consciousness as well. But the bottom line is that we as humanity, we, each and every one of us, we have to integrate the entire energy system. It's not just about the higher chakras and sitting in meditation for 12 hours. But if you get out of meditation for 12 hours and you argue with your spouse or your kids, or you hate your job, you're not integrating. So that's my firm belief. You did go through the 12 steps. You were successful, and you weren't the first person, but I remember one of the early spiritual people in my life, my Reiki teacher, Melissa, and her husband, Catello. He was also in the 12-step program, and he actually didn't identify with it anymore because he didn't like saying, I'm an alcoholic. What are your takes on that? Constantly bringing that up in your own mind.
Well, in step 2, it talks about being restored to sanity. The word sanity means healthy.
Right.
Sanus in Latin, right?
Exactly.
And now I have to become more aware of what's not healthy within myself. Mm-hmm. And that's through conscious awareness and insight, right? And I realized that that's not healthy, even though that's a custom. We learn about epigenetics, how that can affect our gene expression, our environment. Mm-hmm. And that custom is unhealthy, saying that over and over. That's not who I am. I mean, that was an experience I had. But I come to realize the deepest part about being a human is, or being an alcoholic is being a human being. And the deepest part about being a human is my oneness with God and my oneness with the divine. And the deepest part of that essence is my ability to express love and experience this form, but not get caught up in the labels. But yeah, it's definitely not healthy. And I started to look at the limiting beliefs. So you hear about, David Hawkins was a friend of Bill Wilson, who was a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he talks about the map of consciousness, and that's on a lower frequency, claiming that. Why am I going to continue to put myself in this lower frequency? And I think when you tap into the mystic within yourself, you can see stuff beyond the veil, beyond the customs and the behaviors and the belief systems, and you could see clearly how that's unhealthy. Mm-hmm. So I stopped identifying, because that's not who I am.
That's beautiful. It's kind of how I felt in my own journey about taking medication for anxiety, depression. I was, in my own story, I started having anxiety like the first year of college. I was failing miserably. And I'd never failed. Like, I was like, always like, go, go, go. Anne-Marie does everything. And in the first time in my life, I was just like, I can't pass these classes. Like, I didn't know. And I remember having my first really bad anxiety attack. And anyway, long story short, it wasn't until after I witnessed 9/11, because I was in New York City for that, and I saw it from my office window because I used to get to work at 7:30. After that, whatever precipice that I was living on in terms of like sanity, quote unquote, I flung right off. Like, there was like no going back after that. And I needed medication. Like, I needed it. My body chemistry was out of control, and I needed to be on it. And on and off for 10 years, I was on, medication for anti-anxiety. And it wasn't until after I went on retreat, my first Course in Miracles retreat with Tina Spalding, that I realized the only reason why I was still taking all this medication was because I was afraid not to.
Wow.
So that's when I said to myself, I'm not going to live in fear. So we can't live in that fear. And I feel like it's kind of paralleling. If you keep saying to yourself, I'm going to become an alcoholic at any given moment, and you don't move beyond it, you're anchoring in the fear energy and it just won't let you go. So, in your experience, have you been able to let go of that fear of relapsing?
Yeah, I let go of that a long time ago, but I also got to spend some time with it. And really, once I started to move on, I started to feel the fears. If you leave, you're going to drink again, and drink is to die. That was pounded in me.
Yep.
And that's not true. Like I had to catch myself when you go. Yeah, I had to really catch myself because that's deeply ingrained in the 12-step community.
Right.
And a lot of stuff stems from the old belief systems from the early AAs that started it. They didn't know a lot. They didn't know about neuroplasticity, epigenetics, and dopamine, and all those other transmitters. They didn't know how that stuff, and trauma. So yeah, it created a lot of misunderstanding in today's world, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think it's another example of the same kind of forgiveness mindset that you applied to your parents. And like they did the best they could with the knowledge they had at the time, with their experiences they had at the time. And that application, I call it a truism because you can apply it to everything and any sort of situation, is really a core tenet of the forgiveness process that we go through in hypnosis. When you're able to detach the action from the individual and look at the individual as a person who just was as broken, a broken person, and apply your own forgiveness or your own acceptance of what happened, and you're able to move on after that, which is really what we all want to do. That is just beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So my question number 2, and this is kind of obvious, but I am going to ask, how are you healing the world through your life?
By healing myself, and living the core word that's behind every spiritual tradition or religion, and it's Saloa, which means serving and loving one another. And I take responsibility for my life today. The world means our collective belief systems, our collective agreements. It's not the planet Earth, Mother Earth, or Gaia. The world is our collective belief systems, our collective consciousness. And when we heal ourselves, we do our part of healing the world, because I think it's kind of hard for me to comprehend anyone that has a real spiritual experience or awakening not want to be more loving and more kind, because they're in tune to the oneness of life, our interconnectedness. Yeshua said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Pure in heart means that a lot of those old layers that some people call the matrix, those layers are gone. I'm more pure in heart. And I could see beyond the belief systems, beyond the political labels or their spacesuits and so on. And I know that we're all one. We're all connected, and what I do affects others, and what they do affects me. So I think that's my part of healing the world, and healing my mind is by having a disciplined mind, like the Buddha taught. May others treat me tomorrow as I treated others today. I have to live by that.
Yeah. And I also think you're healing the world by doing your podcast. And allowing others to share their experiences and healing through that service. I mean, that's what I thought you were going to say, but no, you
no, you're right.
A beautiful thing.
No, you're right. And what I try to do in my podcast is really show it's okay to express your emotions and your feelings, and be you. I think the greatest minority in today's world is not skin color or race. It's authenticity, and just being authentic, and allowing others. And it's okay to agree not to. To disagree with each other. Like, we don't have to. We live in a world, if you don't think like me or act like me, you're against me and you're my enemy. And you're. Yeah, so I respect everyone's beliefs, and even if I don't agree with them, they don't even know I don't agree with them. I just let them be who they are, and I think that's another way. So that's a great point.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful, because the truth of the matter is, we we really can't agree with everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to hold the opportunity for everyone to do what they are called to do, and allow people to have their beliefs, whether we agree with them or not. We all have our opinions. And I think, not firing back all the time, is is a holy thing.
No,
you
you're
know?
right. And when I do fire back, because I am having a human experience, I'm going to be angry. I'm
Sure.
going to act like a jerk. I always say I don't
Right.
suffer from alcoholism anymore. I suffer from alcoholism at times. But that's the whole purpose of these principles, to apply them, right? And I can
Yeah.
make an amends. I can admit my wrongs and say, hey, I apologize. I was acting like a jerk. I got scared. There was fear here, and so I can really. I don't have to be a trash compactor anymore.
No, you're absolutely right. And I've come across that in my own journey. Like, when am I going to get angry? Like, I'm
Mhm.
angry. I've got things that I'm angry about. But that's, it's just my personal journey that I'm going through right now, something that I'm mulling over in my mind. Um, when is it appropriate to say, shut the fuck up or something,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like when, like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But, or something, or just standing up for an injustice. And I do
yeah.
see you do that, and I admire it. I really admire it. What has been your experience when you do that? How have you have a big platform, and so what has your experience been with that?
I see a lot of people. I lose subscribers,
Mm-hmm.
which is okay. My
Mm-hmm.
podcast is called Broader Lens, and my whole thing is allowing me to be me and allowing you to be you.
Mm-hmm.
And people ain't gonna agree, and that's okay. That's just their journey. Maybe they have some stuff to work. I don't know. That's up to them. But I think at times, I fight with my head. Oh, maybe I need to not talk about that stuff. No, I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna be me. I'm not gonna be the trend. Be part of the trendy stuff. Because I could do stuff to change my thumbnails and all that stuff. Put some fear-based or confusing clickbait titles, and the Vatican lie to you, or
Yeah.
those scary faces, or you're confused. But I think that's disrespectful and dishonest to the person I'm my guest, the person I'm interviewing. I just really try to be me, and you know, um, there's a saying by Lao Tzu: if you're always worried about what other people think of you, you'll always be their prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna really not really focus too much on that, and just continue to be me, and as long as I come from the heart.
Yeah, and I think people see that in your authenticity, and they really resonate with it. I mean, I certainly do. I enjoy the content that you put out. You're one of the handful of people that I listen to. I was speaking with a friend of mine who's like in the early portions of her awakening journey, and she listens to everybody. And I'm like, yeah, I don't listen to anybody anymore. Like I used to. I used to, oh, have you heard about this guy? Have you heard about that guy? Now it's just a quiet few that I allow into my mind, because my mind is very precious. You are very, you spew these beautiful quotes. All these books that are behind you, are you an avid reader? Like, or do they just come to you? Like, how do you remember all these beautiful quotes?
Well, I don't. I don't read books cover to cover. What I do is I read what I need to read at the time, and sometimes I'll open a few more pages later, 6 months later, and like, oh, okay, I needed to read that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess part of it is not knowing how to read,
Mm-hmm.
so I had to like really read stuff over and over to comprehend something.
Right.
So a lot of stuff, what touched my heart sinks into my heart, and it stays there. Certain quotes. So yeah,
That. I notice above your head you have Isis,
yeah.
and you have the Buddha. I know you've been to Kemet. I know you've been to Egypt, ancient Kemet, and you know that I'm going also with my own group in January, a year from now, January the 18th of 2027. Did you have any particular experiences? Like, I mean, I did. I walked onto a couple sites and I'm like, I know exactly what's going on here. Did anything like that happen to you?
Yeah, I had a number of experiences, and I went with Anthony Broader, who has his own. He's the first African American to have his own site there.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we landed, I heard a lady crying, and she's saying, I'm home. And, and I realized, like, her ancestors were taken. And just to experience what I experienced with her is I felt her. It was like my consciousness was in her consciousness, like I in her body. I just felt her, and I actually got teary eyed, and I pretend I didn't hear it. Anthony calls it a comedic morphosis that we have being there. But another thing is with the Sphinx. We hear about the Sphinx, and that means strangler.
Mhm.
That's a Greek word. But in the Kemetic word is Hermakit, Hermakit, which means Horus on the horizon, a new dawn, right? And what I like about that is because I think it takes away its spiritual meaning when you call it the Sphinx. But what I like about that is Horus, his that's a Greek name. It's Haru. But what it represents, and there's so much, it's filled with symbols, right? But I'm gonna do a basic one for here on planet Earth. It's a spiritual. Once I conquer the beast nature, right, the animal nature within me,
Mhm.
like the lower self, I can rise in consciousness. There's a new dawn. There's a rise in consciousness, God consciousness, right?
Mhm.
And because I've done the inner work to rise above my animal nature, and then I can have a shift in consciousness. So I like looking at it that going back to what would you do to discipline your mind, to change your mind, and by
Yeah.
that spiritual discipline, I have a new mind, and I love that. And that's kind of like the explanation of my own spiritual journey. But yeah, just being there and really feeling connected. Like I had an inner knowing. I've lived in ancient Kemet at one time. And going back to what we said about the galactic stuff, even when I was a kid, watching Star Wars or Star Trek, I always felt like I lived in that type of environment before. We call that the future, but we both know is it's only the eternal now. But yeah, I just in seeing the carvings of the maybe possible helicopter and
Yeah.
other spacecrafts.
Mhm.
It gives me confirmation of what I when I was a kid. I just yeah, I just had a really good experience there. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I have enjoyed this beautiful conversation. Is there anything new or exciting going on in your life? Anything to announce?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Tomorrow we launch different paths to source, and there's a lot of great spiritual teachers. Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. My friend Elle, she had a near death experience. She talks about merging into animals and trees and stuff, and during her experience, um, other spiritual teachers like the alchemists and Sarah K. Grace and Father Sean O'Leary and many other great. They all contributed a chapter, and my chapter's in there. It's called A Glimpse of Nirvana. So
And
yeah,
is this a documentary? What is this? And how can we
no,
find it?
oh, you can find it on Amazon. It's a book. It's called
Oh, it's a book.
Different Paths to Source. Because a lot of times in religion you're taught there's only one way and everything else is wrong, but it's really the inner path to the pathless land. So yeah, I try to get some great minds and put a book together, and it's really hard putting a book together. Thanks to my friend Al for all the help she gave, and yeah, and then we have a documentary coming out soon. It's called Interdimensional, and you're gonna see Linda Moulton Howe, and I got to go to her house and record with her, and
Hmm.
um, other great minds, Penny Kelly, and so on. Part of that.
How exciting! That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to know more about you?
Broader Lens Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, or my email is broaderlenspodcast at gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, BooBoo, thank you so very, very much for joining me today. Again, my name is Anne Marie Morales. I provide a really comprehensive range of hypnotherapy and intuitive energy services, channeling and healing. And I am doing my own tour to Egypt in January of 2027. If you want to travel to Egypt with like-minded people and be completely accepted as who you are, sharing your gifts, this is the way to go. It is a first-class Chakras of Ancient Egypt tour, 2 weeks, and you can find all of that information at my website, ammhypnotherapy.com. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, BooBoo. This has been fantastic.
I'm a stizzle.
When you say that, that's hilarious. I love you, BooBoo. Take care.
Thank you.